Hi, I'm Rosie. 4 months ago, I was halfway through Mr. Connolly's Russian literature course, a class that had captured my imagination and academic ambition like no other had done before. The intensity of this subject appealed to me on intellectual and personal levels. Inspired by what we had talked about in class, I started reading and thinking more and more, playing with ideas that would eventually become the foundation of my senior project, a paper on the writings of Dostoevsky, a project that called into question the very foundations of language and communication. The project was an exhilarating experience, and I worked faster and harder than I had believed possible. But as I finished the paper, I began to feel lost. After ingesting novel after novel and page upon page, it was as if a pipe had broken, and the more I read, the more the questions poured in. Spinning off on an ambitious momentum, my ability to find resolution seemed to have lost traction, and I saw chaos overtaking order. Ironically, this experience echoed a fundamental aspect of Dostoevsky's own worldview. In his diary, he wrote that, "Here in Russia, an idea falls upon a person like a huge boulder and half crushes him. Some people accept living crushed, while others do not. This is a pitiful, monstrous, prematurely born generation squirming under boulders." In his writings, Dostoevsky pleads for readers to seek out paradoxes, to reach towards complexity instead of crumbling inwards. He was a thinker who sought to bring light where there was dark, and to guide Kant's timber of humanity through its crookedness towards meaning and connection. Yet a first reading of Dostoevsky does indeed lead to a crushed feeling, because he reveals truths about human nature that are at best shocking and at worst terrifying. No matter how much you apply analysis, the end result inevitably feels instinctively uncomfortable. The conclusions I drew from my project were intellectually fascinating, yet they left me with an utter lack of emotional resolution. And I think that this turbulent encounter with Dostoevsky perhaps is emblematic of a more widespread Commonwealth experience. This is a place where ideas do feel like boulders, and sometimes are crushing. This is a place that brims with analysis, with a need for rationality. After this year, I've concluded that the very skills Commonwealth has given me, the ability to make logical sense of text, problems, and other people, these skills must be, at a certain point, abandoned. I crave linearity, because I have what might be called an overly analytical mind. But this year, analysis ended up working against me. I got lost in the pursuit for answers. It's a distressing experience to feel that the tools which I've spent so long perfecting had suddenly morphed into something uncontrollable. For example, when I sat down to write this speech, I approached it like a connections question from history class. I wanted a logical account. I wanted clearly laid out cause, effect, and correlation. I wanted to make sense of 4 years that are actually nonsensical. Let me start at the beginning. In freshman year, I had an experience that left me with a shattered vision of right and wrong, of trust and safety. But I also saw people, teachers, friends, and family, face what was happening to me with unshakable kindness and inexplicable generosity. I learned how to turn and face a reality that was much darker than it had been before, and I learned that the way out was lined with people who wanted to help. Moving forward, sophomore year, I turned into an academic machine. My best friend and I studied so much that the timelines, the data sheets, the equations swam before our eyes. The momentum of work overtook my desire to learn, and classes felt monotonous and draining. But then junior year, I found out there was a lot more to being a student here than just studying. Ms. Saporin pushed me to express my ideas in ways that brought text to life. Recognizing patterns, she said, was not enough. Analysis was not a stopping place, and there was a whole world of expression behind empirical reasoning. In her class, I found out that there was an art to writing, a linguistic exchange between me and the text that demanded a fluid conception of articulation. Miss Haber opened up a vision of the world through U.S. history that was multidimensional, contradictory, and ambiguous. But that's where the linear connections stop. Here I am, senior year, and I've arrived at what should be a conclusion. But there's really no consistency, and the pieces don't add up. I feel a disorientation similar to what I felt while writing my senior project. Analysis cannot ease the discomfort that I feel when confronted with a lack of rational answers. Now in the final month of school, I'm realizing that my overly analytical mind has searched in vain for a connective thread that simply does not exist. And instead of relying only on rationality, I found a new way out, an absorption that doesn't require analysis. Over the past few weeks, I've read 3 works that have completely changed my relation to the world around me. Malloy by Beckett, Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago, and Proust's Swan Way. What I love so much about these novels is that they depict an experience of life that is fundamentally subsuming. To these authors, concrete concepts of time and space are secondary to communication of visceral impressions and the elimination of boundaries between the internal and external. The landmarks of these characters' existences are blurry and indistinct, but their experience of the world defies rigid quantification by states. This literature parallels how I've come to see my experience at Commonwealth. What has happened to me, what has happened around me, and what I've made happen, these are events that resist logic. The narrative is not, as it turns out, linear, and an imposition of structure merely reduces rather than enhances. A long time ago, Mr. Wharton told me that part of a teacher's job is to relieve you of the onerous belief that you are special. And I did not believe that 4 years ago. But now, what I see around me isn't a reality based on my analysis alone. It's a web of fragmented memories, voices, and images, a chaos that once entered into is beautiful in its irrationality. I've accepted that my intellect can only go so far, and I've learned to relinquish control and eased into a state of being that is indefinite, with uncertain futures and indistinct pasts that all work together in some kind of vague harmony. It's this dynamic vision of the world that has finally made me feel okay within the limits of my own reason, and I've never been happier. Thank you.